to welcome Brian Jacob here from New York. I usually tease on him that he got the fancy cases in Manhattan and I get the nasty one here in the Bronx. But Professor Jacob is a professor of surgery at Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. And if you don't know him, something's wrong with you. So you should be able to know him for a long time now. He is an innovator and mainly the leader and the founder of IHC, International Hunter Collaboration. But much more on this, at least for me, he was the one that opened my eyes to all the social media powers into our medical education. So today, he will come to us to talk a little bit about the importance of the social media for a surgeon, and with his presentation, when a post becomes a publication, social media for a surgical education, post or perish. So, Dr. Jacob.
Thank you, Flavio, and hi, audience of Hernia U. Flavio, thanks so much. It's really been great having you in New York. All the complex cases I used to have to do, we now can send up to the Bronx, and it is very welcoming to do that. I also want to thank Bard for hosting this and giving me a stage to talk about something I'm very passionate about. And for the audience, this particular lecture is not exactly going to teach you how to do surgery, but it's going to teach you how to get help to do the surgeries you may want to ask questions about, and then also how to create your own groups moving forward. So to get started, the topic is called When a Post Becomes a Publication: How to Use Social Media for Surgical Education. And then I add the tag post or perish because I think that's the generation that we're in. And I'll talk for about 20 minutes and then we'll take questions afterward. So does anyone know who Tim Berners-Lee is? You probably don't, but you probably should. So Tim Berners-Lee actually invented the internet. He invented the World Wide Web in 1991. And what people don't know about him is that he was actually a scientist, an engineer and a scientist. And the purpose of him inventing the internet was to expedite the exchange of scientific information, which was not going on at the time. At the time, it was just hand-printed journals, newspapers, and no one was really getting the word out. So when he created this thing, his intention was basically to disrupt medical publishing, but coincidentally, it's the only thing he did not do. So it was what he did not intend to do was to disrupt things like how we exchange and read books, how we get our news, how we trade stocks, how we listen to music or movies, certainly how we date, which of course the World Wide Web has disrupted all those markets. What it has not done is disrupt medical publishing. In 2018, the New York Times looked at this topic and they called us in the post-text era right now. And so what started happening in 2018 is everyone went from exchanging words to exchanging video and exchanging live video at that. And I'm sure by now, 2 years after the revolution really kicked into overdrive, you see it in your hospital and your residencies as well. Almost all residents now communicate in small groups called WhatsApp groups. Doctors do it with their patients. And this type of technology has enabled us to not just use text, but also video. And so that's been going on for a while now. These are my 4 kids. This is not a doctored photo. This is literally what they do when they're not playing with their friends. But you can see each one of them at all age groups is actually on a device. And they're not only playing with themselves, they're actually playing with their friends and with each other. So unlike when we grew up and we were playing a game by ourselves, they're all interconnected into a network. And remember, these are our future surgeons. And so if they're growing up like this, they're going to be looking for this type of interaction when they grow up and become our doctors. And again, this is what gaming looks like today as people play between states with their friends. The surgical instruments have kept up. This is Intuitive Surgical's robot being done. You can see this is a regular task where they have to take a yellow rubber band and put it onto a peg. But what's interesting is now this can be done by 7-year-olds. That's my daughter when she was 7, doing the same tasks that we were learning at the age of 40. So the technology has even made it easier for and more intuitive for our youth to learn how to operate, which is very impressive. Many of you in the audience will remember that in order to get a publication at a meeting, we had to first make a video and put it on one of these things. These are VHS tapes. Today, if you want to get a surgery or a technique out there, all you need is a USB port, a YouTube channel, a Facebook group, and a smartphone, and you're off and running. So things have really continued to change and evolve. So what do we like to do as surgeons? As surgeons, our bread and butter, our every day is about operating. There's no place that we like better than being in that operating room. But the truth is, the second we're done operating, we want to share that information with either our residents or our colleagues. And so we've done this through video, through teaching at lectures. And then the third thing that we like to do is really disseminate that information. We like to show the world, show our network that this is how I do my technique, and leave it out there for others to learn from. The problem is the way that we disseminate that today has reached its limitations. And we do this currently today through four main venues. One are conferences, the second are hands-on labs, the third is mentorship and coaching, and the fourth is publishing our work in traditional publishing. So the problem with conferences is we all go to these meetings, we network, we see our friends, but what happens is we go back to our original cities and we continue to practice the way we were before that meeting. It's actually quite rare that we learn something at a meeting and then bring it home and apply it immediately to the next case. Plus, if you've all been to some of the meetings recently in the States, they're very poorly attended, at least at the end. So you can often walk into a room where there's a lecturer and a panelist. I know, Flavio, you've seen this as well. And there's maybe 15 people in the audience, and they've got these large rooms. And you know, it's not great use of our time. Hands-on training is very important. We all need that. We need to go learn from an expert. We need to watch that expert. That's not going to go away. But the truth is, when we do go, there are people that are unhappy, mainly our family and friends as we leave. And then when we leave those people that are teaching us, the question really becomes, are they still our mentor? Are they going to be there to teach us when they leave? And if so, how? How are they actually going to interact with us when we're 2,000 miles apart or even 5,000 miles apart? And this is the picture depicting that. And of course, there's always, if we leave to go teach you, a family member who's really unhappy. So there has to be a better way of doing hands-on training as well. Publishing is the fourth way we do that. Publish or perish has been a slogan that we use, at least since the early 70s. You're always taught that if you don't publish it, it doesn't exist. And we've believed this and followed it. What we don't realize is that there's a giant industry that's developed behind that idiom, publish or perish. And again, the internet should have disrupted it, but it didn't. So I start to wonder, why not? So here's the scientific journal. We all have our favorite one that we read. They're all online now. And the main reason that it hasn't been disrupted is this little nebulous process called the peer review process. And we all know about peer review. We've all been subjected to its work and getting our stuff rejected. And there's got to be a better way to do it. So why hasn't scientific publishing been disrupted already with the use of the World Wide Web? Well, there's actually 5 reasons that journals or articles specifically haven't been disrupted. For one, when you publish something, it's your claim to your territory. It puts it there permanently and forever, and there's no real contesting it. Although, Flavio, you can agree, there's contesting it, but you can always point to whoever published the first article generally gets to say they did it first. So you register your claim. The second is it's always been a great form of disseminating information to the world. The world has access to it. The third is that you can filter what you read by topic. So if you're not interested in thoracic surgery, then you're not going to get thoracic surgery journals. The fourth, which is never really talked about, but it's this designation within your institution. So your academic promotion is oftentimes based on your publications and where you are in the authorship and your impact factor of each journal. That becomes an important fact. And then finally, that peer review process and approval, which is validation of your work. So if you have been published, that's sort of like saying, okay, someone somewhere said, okay, my work is worthy of being published. If you read the recent news in the United States, they've formally proven that even with a good peer review process, a lot of crap gets through and published, and it can actually be very damaging, not just to the individual who wrote it, but to the publishers, the editors, and the journal, and the whole world of publishing in and of itself. So access to journals. So a lot of you watching are international. You may actually not have great access to medical journals, and I think that's a problem. And so when we go to publish, not only does it take a lot of time and a lot of money, the results are not always available globally. And if they are, they're not even applicable globally to everyone's practice. And then it's that peer review process where you wait 6 months, you're hoping it's going to get published, you're hoping it's going to get published, and bam, it's rejected. And it turns out 80% of submitted articles actually get rejected. That means there's a lot of great work out there not getting read. There's been literature to show that the peer review process is actually imperfect. These are just some of those articles showing how it's actually overwhelmingly ineffective. It's very partial in which articles get through. In general, it's been unsuccessful in ensuring that the best papers get published in the highest status journals. It's often not the case. It's unfair and biased for a lot of different reasons. It's slow and costly, and it can be distorting to the reader. And so what you're getting is a sampling error. When you go to PubMed and you look up articles, you're just getting the stuff that certain people have allowed through. About 80% of the information that could be available is actually not up there. Turns out that there's also a ton of what they call pariah journals. So there's a lot of fake peer review journals out there. And as a reader, you may not actually know if you're reading from something reputable or not. I mentioned that it was actually big business. There's a reason why the peer review process has not gone away, or publishing in general. It turns out it's an $11 billion a year industry. Not to mention that just the peer review process alone, these are the two boxed incomes. These are yearly revenues from the peer review software. So the ScholarOne software is actually bringing $80 million a year to the company that now owns it. And Aries is the other one. It's bringing in $6 million a year. So if you look at your average surgery salary, just being the owner of a peer review process software is killing us. So there's another reason why it's not disappearing. That being said, with all that money going through those systems, you wonder why if we publish something, it's not immediately available to everybody everywhere. And that's sort of their trick. But in general, the University of California 2 years ago said enough of that. And so they started to boycott their contracts with Elsevier, which I believe was an $11 million a year contract. And they basically said, we're not going to be working with Elsevier unless they open up their publishing to something called open access, where everyone can view it. And I know they've tried to sort that out with some innovative ways in the current process. So the other reason why publishing is sometimes not great is that experiences evolve over time, opinions evolve over time. And so we'll publish one thing in 2016. For example, fixation is always required, and 4 years later, we'll change our mind. Fixation is never required. The problem is that that publication locks you into that opinion, and it can be used over and over again, either for or against you. So I circle back to, can social media groups become a journal? And can a social media post become a publication? And I think we all know the answer is yes. It's just a matter of time before it gets more globally accepted. Now, for me, if you know me at all, I am unbiased. I like all social media. It's just that over the last 8 years, I've really took a dive into Facebook. I find it to be one of the best group sharing platforms out there, ahead of LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and Google, and also better than the ACS communities. I just think it's very friendly. It's very available on everybody's smartphones, and it's very usable. And as it turns out, there's research on it. 54% of patients are actually very comfortable with their doctors, or you, the surgeons, seeking advice from these types of communities. In addition, 60% of social media users are most likely to trust social media posts and activity by doctors over that of any other groups. So if you set up a very credible group, you're going to get credible information, and doctors are going to use it. And that's what we saw with the IHC. So for those that don't know Facebook groups, they're secure in the sense that the public doesn't have access to them. They do have the ability to hack your account and get in there, but they can't access our group. So it's like having a conference behind closed doors. We started the International Hernia Collaboration in December of 2012. So we're approaching, I guess, our 8th complete year. So it's actually been around for a while now. But the good news is you can start any group you want. Literally right now, you could log off and start a Facebook group, make it closed, invite your trusted colleagues or friends, and you're off and running. So that's what we did. We started off with 9 people. We hit create. And suddenly, the 9 of us that were trying to really solve tougher case solutions didn't have to go to the internet or to the journals for information. We went to each other. And we went to each other not just with text, but also with video. And we had a continuous active dialogue that was happening. So now if we wanted to figure out the best way to treat a hernia in a 30-year-old female, or an elderly male, or a kidney transplant patient, or a patient on Humira, we had very specific cases. We could ask those specific questions. We could get 3 different opinions. and then come to a consensus, which was the best way to treat that actual patient. And suddenly we had this brand new way of learning that wasn't dependent on somebody else's opinion in the literature or having to travel. We got a consensus and we got it in real time. And this concept grew, and it was fun to have debates because we would argue over different ways of treating people, but ultimately that's what the IHC, or the International Hernia Collaboration, became. It was a collaboration between two discerning opinions trying to figure out which way was best to treat your patient. It also became a great venue for learning. So all you had to do was upload your information or your video. It would automatically be peer reviewed by not just two people you never heard of, but people you actually trusted, because they would be right on there commenting about your upload. And then you'd get a consensus on what to do next from there. We believe, and this is for people who are shy in posting, that there's no such thing as a dumb post. There is really no limitation to what you can post. These groups are designed to help, and people on there love to help. So we feel that it's okay to put yourself out there. You just have to remember that your post should be likable and that the comments should be likable. And what happens every now and then in these groups is you get these comments that seem egocentric, or they seem biased, and those comments are not really welcome. They don't go very far. But if you keep everything likable, there is no such thing as a dumb post. So for one, this is Yuri Novitsky showing us early on how to do a transversus abdominis release using robotics. And you know, he can narrate this and put the video up on the IHC, up on any of the other groups, and suddenly the audience can start to comment. Here's an example of another type of post where you can post a CAT scan, a tough decision-making process of how you want to perform a surgery. You put a little bit of information up there about the patient, you put the CAT scan up, and suddenly you're going to get a bunch of opinions from a lot of different people on how to do it. And you can see in just a short period of time, like 24 hours, you can get 51 comments. You can click on the people that are commenting to see if you know them. There's Flavio Malcher saying, don't touch that hernia. And I trust if Flavio says don't touch the hernia, I'm not going to do a surgery. As it turns out, all these groups and all the stuff we're putting into it, it's called user-generated content. It's not a new concept. At the time now, we're up to 25% of doctors are using social media to get their content. And it's continuing to grow. In the next year or two, we're going to be up to about 60% that are going to be creating and using user-generated content in social media to provide healthcare. It turns out that user-generated content is actually more influential than other types of media. It's 35% more memorable than things like the newspaper or the news at night. It turns out it's a 50% more trusted than things like news and journals. So the reason for it being more trusted and more memorable, again, is the credibility of the people actually using it. So when does a social media post become a publication? When a social media poll is used to disseminate opinion in a lecture. And so if you start going to lectures now, you'll start seeing people using screenshots of the various social media groups. I think if that's happening, that means it's actually a publication. That means we actually believe the information enough to disseminate it outside of the world of social media and get the world out there. And we've seen that done a number of different times. I think it also becomes a publication when we start referring it to learn how to do surgeries. David Laurier is a friend and a surgeon out in Pasadena, California, who probably has the best flank hernia video I've ever seen. And so I like to show this slide all the time, because when you log on and you type in flank hernia and David Laurier, you pull his video up and it's narrated, you really learn where the nerves are, how to fix this thing, and immediately you can ask him a question right then and there and continue your dialogue with him, keep the thread alive, even if the thread was posted 2 years ago, like in this case. We've been also starting to use these groups to disseminate live lectures. This is Dr. Novitsky and David Laurier hosting a webinar as we were talking about one of the great new meshes out there like FACS. And then we've also learned that we can do Q&As like this one, where we can actually bring 6 or 7 surgeons in at a time and then broadcast it to the group. Right now, we're approaching 10,000 members in our group. There are other groups with more, other groups with less, but we can really disseminate a message significantly faster and broader than we could have ever before, and for a very low cost to do so. If you think about how much a meeting costs, this is basically pennies compared to doing so. So this is really a novel breakthrough in surgical education. As far as mentorship is concerned, we've had many mentee-to-mentor programs, mostly spearheaded by Conrad Balliser, who's out in Phoenix. But for example, Andrea Pacula was a surgeon just starting out her robotic experience. and she started to embrace the IHC for some of her early mentoring. We brought her down to a mentorship class. She very quickly learned. She posted, she got feedback, and became very quickly one of our top educators. And you can find Andrea's work in a number of sites now as she learns to teach through mentorship, and now she's one of our top mentors moving through. We've also had some private mentoring, and then what we like to do when you've met somebody online is this online to in-person. So in this situation, I had introduced Dr. Chelawat from India to Mauricio from Sao Paulo in Brazil, and they met it live in Delhi, India when we finally had a meeting. But they had never met before, but they had taught each other on the IHC for a couple years beforehand. These sites are very robust. We're getting up to 220 new posts, or dare I say publications, every month. That's over 16,000 peer discussed cases a year. There's a lot of comments that go into that, and we're obviously global. So you can see this is a 1-year-old stat, but you can see the number of different countries with 100 plus members within the group. So remember, when we post something live, like how to fix a venous injury during a robotic mesh explantation, this is my case, I can immediately show how to treat this potentially lethal problem in a very controlled manner. And let me tell you, if you see a surgery like this just once, how to sew, that's the right iliac vein for those that are not following along. There's a big hole in it that I made as I was removing mesh, but you can see using robotic instrumentation, great visualization, and a little bit of luck that we're able to put a figure of 8 stitch in and stop the bleed and save that patient from a major morbidity. But we can share that immediately and put it out there. It doesn't need to wait for a meeting to get introduced. And then, of course, everyone knows where to find it in the future if they run into it. How do we understand a post reach? For my friends at Bard BD, this is how we track successful posts. And so we look at the number of comments, the number of reactions, and the number of views. And there's algorithms to decide how broad and how much traction we're getting in those posts. There's been research done on this. This is one of the earlier publications on the quantitative and qualitative analysis done with videos on YouTube and how successful that was. But more relevant is now that these are searchable. And again, you can go on these sites and search things. There's been literature done in our group as well. So when a social media post is a publication, we will use it. Let's see if this video will work. To learn. So this is Igor Belyansky posting an abdominal wall anatomy lecture. And you can see that through the IHC, you can not only interact with Igor Belyansky, but also watch his video where he starts to very carefully describe the abdominal wall anatomy and how to apply that to ETEP. How to get your trocars underneath the rectus muscle, how to divide the semilunaris from retrorectus space to the other side, how to connect the two spaces, how to reduce the hernia, how to sew on the ceiling. And then if you have a question like you can see me doing down here below, you can type it in and then Igor will reply to you. So you're really not left alone in this space to work on it. The hernia group is not the only group. We were one of the first. I think the IBC was right there with us in 2012 as a start, but there has to be 100 groups at least now that are out there, are all thriving, or not all of them, but many are thriving. And they're all trying to help patient care optimization at the other end of the spectrum of the purpose and intent of being created. What I'm most proud of is that the main societies have embraced it. So I personally was on the board of SAGES when they agreed to let me help them establish 8 SAGES Facebook groups. They're all now really thriving, but they're not alone. We've also helped the ASCRS, the American Society of Colon and Rectal Surgeons, start their group. We've helped the American Foregut Society, their group. We just did the oncology, the National Oncology Group, start their group through Richard Peterson. We helped them, the ASMBS, start their group. So it really did take off, and all the societies have embraced it and are using it to disseminate and help patient care optimization through collaboration on social media. Discussing and disseminating articles has become popular. It's actually personally helped me stay in touch with one of my mentors, Michelle Gagne, who otherwise we wouldn't be in touch with. And then we've also found ways to help educate and get more residents involved. This is Eric Pauli and his fellow teaching us how to read hernia CT scans. And we found that this is a real nice sweet spot for social media, as you can post your CT scans. Sometimes your own radiologist doesn't read them that well. And Eric is always up there ready and willing to help you read it and tell you where the muscles are, where the external oblique transversalis fascia is, and he'll help you plan a surgery. In addition, as Hani Takla shows right here, it's actually pretty good for referrals too. If you have a patient who moves to a city where you don't know a surgeon, you can look for surgeons that you may trust within these large groups and get them into good hands. Last but not least, at least in the United States, CME or continuing credit has now been possible in these groups, and we've published about that as well, and that's available on PubMed. So we don't have a choice on whether we do social media. The question is, how well do we do it? And I think we were given a chance to really do surgical education on social media correctly, and we are in the process of evolving that to do it well. I think we are absolutely in an era that I label as post or perish. I think that the people who are publishing, we need it, we need it, we need it. We must have publications in the literature. This is not going away. It is our true way to answer science, but there is a lot of noise out there. And I think posting on social media and us increasing the scientific validity of social media will allow this to eventually one day replace that. There is some research that looked at the credibility of our posts. This is done by Mike Liang's group in Texas. What I can say about their conclusions with their paper is that they found that social media groups such as the IHC can be useful methods for surgeons to communicate challenging problems and an important educational tool. And this was done by an unbiased group who we actually don't know. So we're pleased with their conclusion there. We have a white paper out in surgical endoscopy. This is done by authors Bittner, Logue, Kane, Goldberg, Alcidi, Agarwal, and myself. And this is a social society of, what's actually the SAGE's statement on closed social media or Facebook groups for clinical education and consultation, the issues of informed consent, patient privacy, and surgeon protection. And what I'll say about the conclusions that we drew in this white paper is that number one, SAGES does indeed endorse private social media groups for surgical education and patient care optimization. They do actually embrace private groups with the intent on optimizing patient care. And surgeons who do that should be protected. Now, what does that mean? That means that all of this stuff is discoverable. If you post something in a social media group, the lawyers can get to it. But the truth of the matter is, if it's done professionally, it will always help the case, for sure. So we believe that responsible, ethical, and compliant, and I add the word likable, posting is essential. And if you took a quick poll, again, maybe a little bit biased, but here's a poll of 167 surgeons from a few years ago. And you asked them, what's changed or modified your surgical practice more in the past 3 years? And it turns out social media like Facebook groups, Twitter posts, and YouTube has changed more people's practice than level 1 evidence in the published literature. And we've seen this over and over again. I should redo that post, actually. So social media for surgical education, we believe that if you connect the doctors, that's all of us, if you connect us in a place where we can be dynamic and really use it professionally, then you connect the patients to better outcomes, because the person who's posting is going to get a better suggestion or at least a confirmation of what they wanted to do, and their patients will benefit from that, for sure. There's more that we can do in the future. We can start looking at the data on the back end and taking that data and analyzing it. This is the data from the posts, which we don't have access to. Actually, in the early days, we did. Of course, Facebook has protected their users, so we actually don't have access to data like this. But if you can envision creating a platform where we do have access to the data of all the posts, then we can take it and give it back to the doctors. We can give it to the patients. We can give it to industry like BARD. And we can give it back to the hospitals and say, look, there's a lot more we can do with this dialogue. We can predict where sales are going to hit or where better training is needed, et cetera. You know, where certain mesh products may be failing or excelling. There's a lot that we can follow. So these are different ways that we can do more with our user-generated content. So as we prepare for conclusions, a social media post already, in my opinion, is a type of publication. It already, through peer review, validates your work. It already claims your territory for something. It helps spread the word probably better than actual literature. It will filter, because you don't have to be part of groups you don't like. So if you like robotics, you'll join a robotic group. If you like oncology, you'll join an oncology group. And if you like hernia, you'll join the hernia group. And then finally, as far as academic promotion, well, that's a tricky one. I think that's going to take a little bit more time, but I do think as newer surgeons get into the role of providing academic promotion, who may already understand the benefit of groups like the IHC, that they will actually use that to say, hey, we've got a surgeon or a doctor in our hospital who has 40,000 followers and gets 60 comments all the time. And every time they post a video, it's being watched globally. Well, there has to be academic promotion for that. That has to carry some credibility. I think we'll see it. So are we ready to evolve or create new technology to meet our scientific standards? I think the answer is yes. So Bard and audience and Dr. Malcher, my final conclusions: the next generation of surgeons will be addicted to social media and collaborative learning. I think that is pretty obvious. The IHC and the whole Facebook group movement, as well as other yet to come collaborative efforts that are going to be out there and replace the current movement, are going to be types of publications. There's no doubt in my mind. We may need these posts, or at least the good ones, to end up in some sort of national library like PubMed, or some place where people not in the group have access to the final threads. And I know Facebook themselves would love to do something like that. I don't know if it'll ever happen. And then user-generated content will have a role in addition to traditional publishing, which has a lot of room for improvement, for sure. Patient outcomes will continue to improve by keeping physicians connected and collaborating with the intent to improve technique. And that is my conclusion. So thank you for your attention. I hope I've done a reasonable job on at least a thought-provoking topic where posts may one day become publications. Thank you, Bard and Flavio.
Thank you, Brian. For sure, I've seen this presentation a couple times before, but every time I watch it, I have a different take from it, and I really enjoy it. I'll have some comments online, but I don't see any specific question. So if you guys online want to do a specific direct question, just let me know on the chat area and you, and I'll be happy to bring into the discussion. So as an own testimonial, I use social media in a very selfish way, to be honest. I do it because I want to learn. I want the feedback. And I'm happy when some people learn from me, but to be very honest, I do it on my own benefit. I want to get out there and see. And I don't know if it was you or someone else that we discussed about coaching, because even the very professional high-end athlete, they have a coach, and the guy is the best player in the world, the best top 5 player in the world, but there's always somebody telling how to improve. And we think ourselves as the best surgeons, but there's always something that we can learn. And to be honest with you, that's how I learn right now on my practice.
That's great. So, you were an early user. I think it, and also you moved from different countries, and I really think it helped keep you connected to your community as you made your transition as life, as you became the big professor that you've become. But you also went from sort of teacher to bigger teacher along the journey, and I think it's kept you connected and expanded your growth in your network for sure.
Yeah. So I have a few questions for myself while we wait a couple of online questions. So how not to be an overwhelming task? Because I sometimes feel myself that I'm doing too much. I always on my phone and looking to posts and everything. And I think it can easily be overwhelming. How do you do, or how do you suggest that we manage our time into the social medias to be something healthy?
Yeah. So you have to first decide how much time you want to devote to your own family, your own work, and make sure that comes first, because this can become addicting. But I think you have to be curious. We're all living on our smartphones. We check our texts continuously throughout the day. I think, at least around where I live, a lot of us are addicted to those phones. We're also addicted to our patients. And so you have to get past the barrier of being afraid to post. I think that's one of the most important things. And some groups are friendlier than others, but you have to be willing and open to get feedback, right? So we all are very comfortable with our work, right? And there's Flavio, there's always going to be a percent of doctors who just don't feel comfortable on social media. But for those that do, you have to budget your time, and maybe you do it at the end of an office hours. I think it's the best time to ask for help, because you've seen all your new patients, you've looked at some new CAT scans. That's the moment where your brain's really trying to figure out what it is you're going to do for a treatment plan. And that's the right time to put the post up there. Take a quick video of the CAT scan, put in some form of a history, and then click post. And again, if you don't know, if you're new to a group, but you know Flavio or myself, you can always tag us to get the thread started. I know that sometimes we'll get 3 or 4 posts in the same hour, and so some may go unnoticed, and that's always disheartening. That shouldn't be. But if you tag us, we'll get right back to you.
Yeah, I think this is like great tips. What I do right now when I finish a case and I think that I have something interesting to show, or I want to get comments on this, I edit that surgery on the same day or the next day. I don't wait, oh, I'll do next week, because you're never going to do it. And all your thoughts are fresh in your memory. So edit your videos the day of the surgery, the day after, post your TT or your doubts at the same day in the office, as Brian said. And again, don't be shy. Most of those groups are very friendly, but you need to be open. And it's amazing when we follow those threads and they get aggressive. Usually they get aggressive by the guy that posts. It's almost never from the comments. The comments just give feedback, and sometimes the person that posts, they don't like the feedback, and that's okay not to like. They say, okay, I politely disagree, but that's fine. But the aggressiveness starts usually with the guy that posts, and you don't need that. We all make mistakes. We all have different opinions, and that's okay to disagree. Even it's good to disagree, because I think with disagreement is how we learn much. But don't be aggressive. There's no reason to be. You're not being judged. We're just learning from each other. I think this is the main point. So we have a question here from Conrad. Say, Professor Brian, can you give us your insight on the significance of peer review articles in the setting of the social media?
So Conrad, my insight on peer review in social media. Look, I'm not sure what you mean by that question, but Conrad knows me very well. To me, the peer review process is best applied to rigid scientific work. So in the journals, the peer reviewers have a responsibility not just to provide an opinion, but to actually look at the science and make sure that it's solid, to make sure that the paper answers the question and that it doesn't overstate a conclusion. We need those things in the published literature, but in the social media world, to me, a peer review is an overwhelming acceptance of what's being posted by your peers who are in front of your face. So if I post a CAT scan and I say how to do this, and I get 6 people to say to do it, method 1, and 1 person do method 2, it turns out I actually think method 1 is best for my patient, we've got a consensus. That's peer review on that type of question. Or if I post a video of how to do a robotic tap for a belly button hernia, and 8 of the surgeons up there say, look, you're really off with that right hand, and you're in the wrong plane, that's great peer review to tell me I'm not quite ready yet. So I think that's the type of peer review that's there. The third type of peer review is going to be in a world that's not yet created, where we actually start using social media to formulate actual opinions about publications, where you can post an article or pieces of an article and have people read the intro, read the methods, read the conclusion, read the results, and have a group review as opposed to 1 or 2 people do a peer review of that process, and then take that final article after the peer review, put it back together, and then submit it someplace more formal. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and that's actually what worries me the most on social media, because we can see, as you showed, beautiful video from David Luria, and saying, oh, that's so great. That retroperitoneal anatomy is great. I want to do this. And it looks so easy, and I should find the nerves. And you go out there, and it can be dangerous for your patient if you're not properly trained. So one of my worries of social media is, where is our safety? How can we be responsible and try to give the right perspective or right idea for the audience? That is, it's okay, those stories are great, they're okay to be done, but you need to follow some proper process. And I think we are lacking somehow a peer review to say, okay, the way that David Luria does this procedure is the way that should be done. It's not because he just posts a nice video, but it's because Dr. Jacob or Dr. Ballister, Dr. Abdallah, they all review his technique, and he's saying they are all saying that is a safe approach for that particular problem. So I think that is what's really bothering me right now. Social media is we don't have this safety net, and that's kind of the peer review process. What are your thoughts? Where can we go on this? That is
So it's an easy thing. So if you look at one of your old colleagues from Brazil's group, the Mini group, they turned on a feature that allows the group admins permission to post the post or not. So if you upload a video, the admins have to decide if it's going to show up in the group. So that's basically peer review. So it gives control to the editors. So any one of these groups can be set up to do that. So if you set up your own group and you say, look, I'm the only admin of this group, I'm going to turn on this feature that allows me to have the final say of what gets posted. You can then receive every post. You can write back the author and say, look, I'm not going to let this get into the group because it needs this done to it. So that step in the process already exists, and all you need is a few other little steps in there, and then you've got a formal peer review before it shows up.
So why don't you, for example, in your IHC, why don't we have this?
We decided not to turn it on because I wanted the individual surgeon to make the decision of whether or not it should get posted, especially in the case of emergency cases. I didn't really want to be responsible for, being an editor. I just wanted everyone, and I trust everybody. So I trust that what's going to show up is going to be legit. And by the way, if it's not, we'll take it down. So we're pretty good at policing each other. So I didn't want that responsibility. Not for that group. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Good.
So I think that the way is the nice thing of getting older and have gray beard and gray hair or no hair is that you have a kind of perspective of what happened in the past, and you can kind of imagine what is coming in the next. So I was trained in open surgery in the beginning of laparoscopic era. And at least in Brazil, and I think happens more or less the same everywhere around the world, the laparoscopic surgery debuted outside academia, okay? And then took decades until academia really got into MIS. And now we see the same with robotics. We have these private guys or less academic that are pushing the bar so far in robotics, and little by little academia comes after and validates. And I think it's kind of the way it is. But what is missing right now to academia recognize social media as an educational tool?
And why is that?
Yeah, I mean, because I don't see right now, I see for the last couple of years, societies getting into social media, but I still don't see the big universities and academic centers going into social media as an educational tool.
Right. And my question is, why is that?
That's my question for you.
Oh, well, I can tell you my opinion. My opinion is that the number of people that you're talking about is far less than the number of people who are using it. So if you add up this tiny little cohort of people that you're describing, this academic group, they're really just a small number of them, individuals. But if you look at all the people in all the social media groups, we're already a couple 100,000 deep. So there are far more individual doctors using social media than not. Now, what you're doing is you're putting a lot of stake into this, what you called academic surgeon, these types of people. But to be honest with you, we need people not in the group also. We need people to do real science, answer questions about which drugs are better for certain cancers. We need to know which treatments are better for high blood pressure. Some of the stuff really just isn't applicable to education in social media groups. It's just not. But for the sweet spots where it is, I think you're going to see increased penetration and use. Again, we've had med students who follow the IHC for years, and then they graduate and they become residents, and then they graduate and they become into positions. You know, those people, once they're in those new positions of directors of MIS fellowships, they're going to embrace the social media groups, and you're going to see a shift in the paradigm. It's just a matter of time.
Okay, so I agree with you. The problem is, though, that small group of academia, they have a lot of weight on our practice. So that's why but they'll get there. They always get there. They just
So what do you mean they have a lot of weight on our practice?
not our practice, our day-by-day practice, but in our social or on our surgical community, on guidelines, on standard of care, and all this. I still they still have. Don't you agree? Or we just
No, I don't actually agree. But look, like I said, we need everybody. So we need the scientists and the pure academic doctors to publish their science, because what they're doing is they're answering questions, right? So a true scientist is going to have a question. They're going to use the scientific method to answer it. We need those answers out there, just as much as we need to know that, you know, 5 of my colleagues agree that the way I'm about to do this gallbladder is the right way to do it. So we filled a void. We're not replacing something that's already in existence. If and when posts become a publication, we're not going to necessarily replace publications. We're just going to disrupt the way it's being done today, if that makes any sense. And so, you know, again, if you look at your kids and you think that they're not going to come up with a better and faster and more digital way to publish, you're crazy. It's going to be disrupted, but we're not going to replace the academic people. We need them.
absolutely, we need them into this to have a different way to post. Because I agree with you. I can show you my whiteboard. I have 25 papers listed to be submitted. But every time we submit, we wait 2, 3, 4 months, and then we have a reply that may be yes or no, but most of them are no's, and you need to. So they takes time. So
Yeah.
you guys need to find a way that we can post and publish at the same time on a validated review process, whatever is safe for the community. But it needs to.
I agree.
We have a question from Dr. Abdallah from São Paulo, Brazil. I think that we already answered. Do we really need the whole peer review process to publish our post, or it will be a new process?
It's a great question. I actually had a meeting with Facebook about this. I think it would be a whole new process. A whole new process. You could go the other way where everything gets into PubMed, but I think you need a whole new process.
I think that we need a new PubMed, maybe a new social media posting PubMed that needs to be understood as a different way to search information. We don't want to make our post as formal publications, and we don't want to take the space of the formal publication, but we need to have a PubMed-like system, because you show this search tool of Facebook, and I think for me is the Achilles from Facebook is the search tool. We don't have a very nice searching tool right now.
We actually do now. It's getting much better. But let me just tell you, so Facebook has thought about this, and I can't comment on whether or not they're going to move on it, but they know very well that they have hundreds of thousands of doctors using their platform for this type of education. And they've been looking at, well, what if they become a new type of PubMed? What if there's a way to take all the top threads from all the different healthcare groups and categorize them and have them in a place where not only the people in the group can get access to them, but patients and doctors and anyone, you know, can get to this subset of groups. So this version of PubMed, but it's within Facebook. So a separate group of the top posts of each group, all filtered, all highly searchable. You know, that I think is the answer for at least the Facebook world.
All review, because
and they have access to, you know, 2.5 billion people. So it's really the right place for it.
Great.
But no, so to answer Ricardo's question, it would be a whole new process.
Yeah, I imagine so. So, any final comments, Brian?
No, look, my final comments are, look, you have to think outside the box, and you have to ask questions, and you have to question the status quo. Otherwise, the world doesn't evolve and grow, and nor do we as individuals. So I am, for one, somebody who always takes the way we currently are doing it and asks, well, what are other ways of doing it? Why do we have to do it this way? And I think that that's a healthy way of living. As far as the social media movement is concerned, I think we've just seen the beginning of what it's going to look like in 10 years. And again, thank you, Flavio and Bart, for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Brian. Just as my final comment, if I may so, I say social media, but actually is a couple of groups on Facebook. They really make me a better surgeon. And I really cannot see myself getting where I got without it, to be honest. I think it makes me such a better surgeon just by watching and learning and get the feedback. And I don't see how the young folks out there are out of this. You need to just jump into it. It will be good for your career. It will be even better for your patients. So join us. Let's put it this way. Let's join us.
I like that, Flavio. Good conclusion.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Stay safe, please.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.